with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Hey, Rich, I got some good news.
And what is that,
Neil?
Neil?
We're now being heard on KMAS-AM in Shelton, Washington State, and that's also on FM 103.3. Wow, man, Rich, we are growing. This show is growing. We're getting new affiliates all the time.
You know what I find interesting, Neil? That we're picking up affiliates, yes, all over the place, but at the same time we're picking up affiliates in some very, liberal states, which is interesting, don't you think?
Well, we're bringing him love and economic freedom, and we're unleashing folks to let them go out in the world and establish themselves and not have Big Brother, the government, doing all the thinking for you, because, Rich, we can think for ourselves.
Well, all I got to say is Soylent Green, all right? That kind of puts it a little perspective on it for them.
Talking about thinking for ourselves, I mean, I was watching Bernie, your good buddy Bernie, the other
Love
day.
It.
And, it's just so apparent. I mean, he's making this argument that we should all just turn over all of our thoughts and all of our needs, and we should just depend on the government just to take care of us for the rest of our lives. And we just don't have to think. We really don't have to work. After all, we're all victims. And the only entity that can protect ourselves and save ourselves is the government. I mean, that's his whole argument. And by the way, it's the argument of all of his colleagues, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to be. And I got to tell you, every Friday night in season, when I was at Syracuse University, we did exactly that. But that was Friday night in my freshman year and sophomore year. It ended. No, of course. You can't have cradle-to-grave concepts that way. It just doesn't work.
But that's what this whole political season is about. I mean, it's about who should think for us, right? Should we think for ourselves, or should the government think for us? And, it's a pretty scary thing, right? I mean, if we just all sort of outsource or delegate ourselves, our souls to the government, what kind of beings would we be?
No, Neil, what's even scarier is that we're going to listen and give our rights to think to a guy like Bernie Sanders as the president. That, I have to tell you, wakes me up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not quite sure that I can do that, and I could delegate my decisions for my family to a guy like Bernie Sanders, who, when he was a kid, got thrown out of his own hippie commune. Just saying. All right, just saying.
And
that's
it goes
a little
for
scary.
His honeymoon to
I didn't
Red
know
Square.
Too many people. You don't get thrown
women.
out of a hippie commune. It's impossible. No. But Bernie did it. He took a puppy, by the way, but he did it.
Hey, look, we're going to continue this discussion. A great piece in RealClearPolitics. We love RealClearPolitics and all their polls and all of their editorial. A great, great organization. We follow it here at Made in America. Philip Wegmann, who's on the RealClearPolitics staff, has published a piece, The Free Stuff Primary, What Democrats Promise Will Cost. And oh boy, will it cost. Hey, Philip, welcome to Made in America.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, Philip, besides the whole idea that yes, there's all this free stuff, and we're going to talk about that here in a second, but it's also who should be thinking for us, right? I mean, do you get that? I mean, do you see that?
Well, I don't think that, Democrats are necessarily wanting to control the way we think just yet. At least the presidential contenders seem to be shying away from anything that extreme. But what is very interesting is that if you lay out all of the promises that they have made as far as helping you to provide college tuition for your kids or childcare or rent or guaranteed income or health care. The list just goes on and on.
But Philip, isn't that what we should be thinking about for ourselves? How to do those things?
Yeah, certainly. That's the conservative mindset would be that it is your responsibility as an individual to take care of yourself, and that you and your community will make better decisions for you and your family than the state will. And I think what's striking is that we see a lot of these ideas coming from the Democratic Party right now, which just 4 years ago were seen as sort of cult favorites, things like Medicare for all. But now that's the orthodoxy of the party. There has been a significant and undeniable shift to the left, even from what we saw from Hillary Clinton just 4 years ago or Barack Obama.
I mean, Rich, this isn't just a little shift to the left. I mean, this is crashing over the guardrails.
Neal, what I'm listening to, I mean, I cannot find a society.
Rich,
wait a minute, let me finish this. Where you take all of that and then you keep all the decision-making processes for yourself. I don't believe that for a second. You are giving up something to get something in return, because it's going to have to be moderated by somebody other than yourself.
But guaranteed income, I mean, that's a biggie. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think what, maybe what Rich was getting at there is something that people instinctively understand, that whenever you do accept some sort of assistance from the government, that there's going to be obligations put in place as a result. We all know this, right now. For instance, if you want to apply to get food stamps, if you want to apply to get onto Medicaid, there are certain restrictions that come along with it. So I think the conservative and the Republican argument against this would be that type of growth of the government does away with autonomy. What's going to be really interesting is to see whether or not the electorate finds that argument persuasive, or whether they even care anymore. Because remember, you have a large group of millennials. They could, as a generation, there are more of them than baby boomers at the moment. These are guys who didn't see the Berlin Wall fail. They didn't see the United States, contain and eventually defeat communism. And so socialism is no longer a boogeyman for them. And I think that this election in particular is going to be very interesting, because the Trump campaign certainly wants to paint their opponents as socialists. And at a moment when a lot of people aren't afraid of that, that invective, we'll see whether or not it pans out for them.
Well, don't you find it interesting? And I think what you just said is very true. I don't think the millennials understand it at all. So, A, they're not taught it very well in school, if at all. Number two, they're not paying attention to what happened in the 80s because they don't care. And what I do find, though, and here's the oxymoron for me in this whole sense, is that they can see what happened in Venezuela, they can see what's happening in Cuba, they can see what's happened in many other socialized countries, and maybe, if we're lucky, they'll read a couple of books that explains what happened in Russia or China or other societies where the government controlled everything. Maybe they see it just doesn't work. So what I don't understand is, why can't they just watch television every night and watch the news, if they do, and see what's happening in a disaster like Venezuela or in Cuba?
I think that's going to be a big challenge for Republican strategists as we move closer and closer towards Election Day, because to try and make that argument a historical argument about this ideology, that's an argument that requires you to take a look at what has happened over the last couple of decades and really study the issue. Good luck doing that, though, if you're a Republican, because Republicans are still miffed that while the majority of the country got a tax break, their frustration is that no one knows about it. So I think that Republicans certainly have their work cut out for them, to say the least.
But Philip, but also I think the Democrats do too, right? Because, I mean, even Nancy Pelosi said the other day, when we're talking about some of the Democrat socialists that have now, the freshmen in Congress getting a lot of media attention, and she just kind of dismissed it, about the whole idea about the Democrat socialists. Oh, there are just a few of them. There's only 3 or 4 or 5 of them around here. I mean, it's no big deal.
Right.
They don't want it. It looks to me like, the people running the Democrat Party don't want that. They don't want that label. I think that they believe that is a losing proposition.
They may not like that label, certainly, Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders, along with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they're not afraid of the Democratic Socialist label anymore. But more interesting than labels are the programs that are being talked about openly right now, which just 4 years ago were radical. I know that we mentioned Medicare for all, but now we're actually, the new litmus test here is college tuition. It's no longer enough to say that community colleges and traditional four-year state universities should be free, which is a radical proposition in and of itself, and one that's being pushed by Bernie Sanders currently. Now you have Warren coming out saying that the federal government should forgive as much as $50,000 worth of student debt for any individual making less than $100,000.
Hey, Philip, it's been wonderful to have you on our show, man. It's great stuff. I love your piece. And the free stuff primary, what Democrats promises will cost. Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. We love your organization. Please come back again and see us.
Hey, anytime. Thank you.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to continue this discussion. You don't want to miss it. Still a lot to talk about here.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Hey, Rich, that was a very, very fascinating discussion with Philip Wegmann from RealClearPolitics and his latest piece, The Free Stuff Primary. That's a great headline, and that's exactly it, The Free Stuff Primary. And his comment was very, very astute, and it's right. And I've been watching this, and I've been thinking about this. The concepts that we're seeing today, and the political mainstream. The U.S. is a two-party system, so one of those parties coming out with all of this stuff here that even 4 years ago, even 2 years ago, would have not been a winning proposition. And now, Rich, we see Joe Biden getting into the race. And, is he going to be, way out there on the lunatic left? And can anybody who's not on the lunatic left get through a primary here? And, it's just like they're outdoing each other. Like every day you hear about this, they're all outdoing each other. All of this free stuff. And, I'm sure that we're going to see some scoring on this to see how much this stuff costs, but I'm talking about trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars here.
Oh, yeah.
How can we afford it?
Oh, yeah. No, we can't. That's the whole point.
With nobody working. Because nobody will be working if you're paying taxes like this. There's no incentive to work anymore.
It's going to be worse than that.
And who cares to work, because we all got a guaranteed income.
Neal, if you don't have energy and you can't drive a truck, and you're not going to have gas, and you're not going to have fossil fuels, and you're not going to have sustainable electrical power that runs a grid that can cool you in the summer and heat you in the winter and produce cars. And, well, you don't need cars because you're not going to have them. If all that goes away, we have a bigger problem than what we're talking about right now. And I'm listening to our guest, and I think he's very great. I check RealClearPolitics every day, multiple times. But when I hear that the millennials are not paying attention, or it's like, well, if they understand the historical perspective, maybe they're going to understand what's happening today. It's like, wait a minute. I don't need any historical perspective. Let me ask you this question. Why are people, thousands of people, marching out of the Andean countries or Central America, the social dictatorship countries, particularly i.e. Venezuela, Nicaragua, Salvador, and all those others, and coming up to the United States? Why do people jump in the water and try and swim the Florida Straits to get out of Cuba? Is that because it's so great here, or is it because it's so crappy here? It's great here. There are opportunities here. So I'm stunned that we have to sit and listen to, kids say, well, what's wrong with socialism? What's wrong with socialism? Well, let me think. The Chinese killed 70 million people. Stalin killed 60 million Russians. That's called consolidation of power for the state. And if you don't have to look anywhere else but Cuba right now, ask why people are trapped in that island. And trust me, this is coming from the guy that's been there 10 times in the last year and a half. And when you look at the other scenarios that we're seeing in Venezuela and those other countries you mentioned, my God, somebody better wake up. If they can't see that, we really have a bigger problem.
Yeah, and then what's the future of entrepreneurialism? I mean, what is the future? I mean, when entrepreneurs no longer have an incentive to even get out of bed in the morning, why bother? Because, it's all guaranteed income, right? I mean, all of these freebies, someone's going to have to pay for it. So any money you make, you keep nothing. I mean, so why bother? Why bother? I mean, it will extinguish the American entrepreneurial spirit, that creativity that has changed the world to be a much, much better place. I mean, American small businesses, I mean, forget about it. They employ 80% of the people in this country. They do an amazing job here at creating jobs, and we're seeing that right now. We see what happens when you awaken the American entrepreneurial spirit. You see an incredible economy. What's it growing right now? At over 3%.
3.2% quarter one.
Exactly. We're going to talk about that in just a moment with John Tamny from FreedomWorks. We're going to talk about the latest economic figures. They are really, really good. It's because why? It's because the American entrepreneurial spirit has been awoken. That's what is driving this economy. That's why wages are up. And by the way, everybody's got a job. Everybody's been invited to this party. You take a look at the employment or unemployment rates for the minorities, for women. I mean, they're at historic lows right now because the American entrepreneurial spirit has been set free, right? We've been unshackled. We were shackled for many years. So now people are sitting around at the table. They're talking to their significant other. They're talking to their family. Should I jump in? Should I jump in? What can I expect? Can we round up some investment capital here? And can we launch this business? And they're saying yes. They're saying yes. We're going to do it. We're going to jump in. We believe in this country. We believe in the economy. Great things are going to happen, and we can't benefit ourselves and benefit our families, benefit our communities, benefit our country unless we take that risk. And right now, they're encouraged to do so. And but let me tell you, Rich, and you've touched on this many times. If we go in a different direction, and if you take a look at all this crazy stuff, the free stuff that we just talked about, the primary of the free stuff, and whoever gets through this primary, Rich, is going to be the one with the most free stuff. And then they're going to be stuck with it.
Why don't
they
just call it
vote
that?
For that?
Just call it that. Call it free stuff. Be honest about it. Free stuff. There it is.
And it's resonating, though. I mean, it's resonating because, let me tell you, what is there, 20 people in the Democrat primary right now? And they're all having their pollsters, and they're all getting the polls out, and they're all, looking at this data. Now, remember, they're only polling, the people who are going to vote in the Democrat primary. But the people who are voting are saying that we like this stuff. They're finding that the people who are going to go out there in the primary season are going to award the politicians for these type of loony policies. Hey, Rich, we're going to carry on. We talked about the economy. Where are we at with that? And our good buddy Steve Moore, hey, this guy is getting run through the mud. I mean, that is absolutely terrible. He's hanging in there. We're going to talk about that, too. Don't want to miss it. We're on with John Tamny from FreedomWorks in just a moment.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neal Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Hey, Rich, the hair on the back of your neck, man, is standing up. This free stuff discussion, the primary of the free stuff, man, has got you going here. Do you got any final comments on that?
Yeah, I do, but I have to get the theme song to Rocky on first so I can kind of get into the mode for what I want to discuss about it. But yeah, if in fact, final point, and then I want to go on. Final point, if in fact we have to explain to folks today who don't want to study history so they don't get socialism or anything like that, but they don't even pay attention to what's happening with thousands of people coming out of Central America, Venezuela, and so forth, or people risking their lives literally, if we remember living here for years, every day, coming out of Cuba. Because why? Because socialism doesn't work. Because government-controlled socialism, communism doesn't work. Marxism doesn't work. Final comment, Lenin, of course, we all know this, called the people who believed all the lies that he and all the others put out in the early 1900s, before and during the Russian Revolution, called them useful idiots. I am concerned about that. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, well.
That's it. I'm done. There you go.
Man, there we go.
Listen, I got to go climb some steps.
Studio, man,
I got to go climb some steps. I can't help it. I got to go do it.
He's the magician. Magician Phil. Hey, we're going to bring up right now John Tamny. We promised this, and here he is. John Tamny from FreedomWorks. John, welcome to Made in America.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, so a lot to talk about here. Let's talk about the latest economic numbers. I mean, they look pretty good. I mean, in fact, they look very, very good. I mean, despite all this craziness going on in our country right now, there seems to be a lot of confidence in our economy. The entrepreneurial community has been awoken. They're out there investing. They're creating jobs, and the country's growing. So, John, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah, isn't it interesting when you look back to December, they were saying that the shutdown was going to have a really negative impact on economic growth. I will just say one thing, and this isn't a knock on the Trump economy or anything. If you like GDP, you like Jimmy Carter's economy because it soared under him. Let's face it, government spending, which we know doesn't power economic growth, actually increases GDP. Conversely, a trade deficit, which all that is a sign that you're taking in massive amounts of investment capital, actually drives the number down. So I don't like the number overall. What I look at is Trump good broadly on economic freedom? Broadly, he is. There's some things I disagree with, but as long as the people are free, you don't need to worry about these ridiculous numbers. They never calculated this in Hong Kong, and with good reason. Free people prosper.
Well, it's great that he said Hong Kong, because Hong Kong's, economy has soared for decades. And it's one of the areas when you look at the Hang Seng and you look at their numbers going back 10 years from now, they were just about where we are now, maybe a little bit lower 10 years ago, and we're just getting there. So, there's some value to what we just heard as it relates to, do I want to look at these numbers? I'm not so sure.
So John, let me ask you, big deal here. Very big deal. I think a lot of Democrats, we're going into an election season. Obviously, it's already been started. A lot of Democrats there, who I guess we would call them moderates. I mean, I don't know if there's a lot of them left, but they're still there. They're looking at a lot of this free stuff, the crazy stuff. Everybody going way, way, way out to the left, promising all this stuff. And now enter Joe Biden. Joe Biden gets in. And I can see a lot of Democrats breathe a sigh of relief. We're going to have at least a centrist that's out there, and he's going to be able to take all those blue-collar votes away from President Trump in the Midwest, and that's going to be their road to 270. They're going to win, and, Trump will be over and Biden will be in. I mean, what can you comment on that? I mean, is Biden the guy who's going to take him to the promised land? Can he get through the primary? And will he bring along with him those blue-collar workers, white blue-collar workers primarily in the Midwest states?
Well, I think the assumption is that for him to get through the primary, he's going to have to tack so far left that it's going to make it difficult for him in the national campaign. I think that gives Biden too much credit. We're talking about a two-time loser. This guy is not a good national politician. He doesn't know how to do it, and I don't get the feeling he's learned. I don't get the feeling that he's better and seasoned at the age of 76. So I don't, even if the Democratic Party weren't more left-wing, even if it were more centrist, I don't see Biden as the guy making that of it. As for Trump himself, if the economy's good, I think that the odds are he wins. And so I don't think there's too much to worry about, but I don't expect it'll be running against Biden.
Oh, really?
Well, let me ask you this. You're right. I think if the economy is strong and remains strong, but let's throw something else in that Kudlow talks about, and that's China. What if he cuts a deal with China before the election? Don't you think that's really the catalyst to absolutely cementing a strong economy here as well as overseas, and ultimately his reelection?
Well, I think with that, I think we always overrated how much the Trump voter was actually protectionist. I'll go to my grave saying that they voted for a person over policies. I think if Trump had said, hey, you're getting ripped off by tariffs that are raising the cost of the goods that you want to get, I think he could have won on that, too. And so it terrifies me when Republicans are talking about cutting deals on trade. The reality is that trade is an individual act. Countries don't do it, individuals do. So I wish that we weren't even having this discussion. As someone who aligns with the Republicans, I hate that our parties become so protectionist. But yeah, it wouldn't hurt to get that out of the way, and much sooner than the election, because it's a needless overhang. Look, we were much worse off when China was a desperately poor country. We are a much more prosperous country now that the Chinese are working and prospering. It used to be that Republicans said, we don't want the rest of the world to be communist. We want them to be productive, profit motivated. Now that the Chinese are, suddenly we think it's a bad thing. So I want to get that over with and move on. But I wish we didn't have to make trade deals. Let's leave that to the Democrats who want to control our lives.
Wow.
That's a good statement. I like that one. That was a great ending on that sentence.
Well, yeah.
All right, let's vote for this man.
That guy.
This guy's running.
I'll vote for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
hey, John, we're going to take a quick break. We're on with John Tamny from FreedomWorks. We got a lot more to talk about. We're going to talk about our friend in the nomination to the Fed of Steve Moore, who's getting dragged through the mud. This is terrible. He's a great American. We're going to talk about that and many things too. You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we have with us right now John Tamny from FreedomWorks. Hey, John, a couple of things. Great stuff. You know, the economy. If it's going, you know, if we do a deal with China, we start exporting more agricultural products. Of course, that's a very, very important constituents for President Trump. We start exporting more energy. China makes a deal. You know, there's going to be a tremendous amount of business being done with the United States that's not being done now. More jobs, more GDP growth, an amazing thing. I'd read something today in CNN. I believe it was CNN. I was coming back from Philadelphia to South Florida, and it was the title of the piece was called "The Trump Card," and that is if President Trump dumped Vice President Mike Pence and enlisted Nikki Haley, that would be an amazing thing, and it would be clearly, you know, Trump would be unbeatable at that time. Do you think that would happen?
I don't see it happening, and it just strikes me that's just such inside Washington. Hey, if you tack here, you'll pick up the female vote that you didn't get before. I don't think it's ever worked. I don't think there's any evidence that whom you pick as vice president has some sort of major impact. And so I think it actually would be a failure. I think that it would etch in voters' minds that Trump isn't as much of a free thinker as thought, that he likes to play this stupid Washington game. Let's kind of move here and here to get different votes. Don't be that guy.
Very, very, very well said. Okay, Steve Moore, good guy, been on our show many, many times, talked to us, you know, during the Obama years about all kinds of things. And, of course, during the Trump years, he's played a very important role, together with Larry Kudlow. When President Trump was then candidate Trump, he released his tax plan. And I know Steve Moore participated and was very, very instrumental in that. And great man. Do you see him getting confirmed?
It's certainly getting interesting. Let me be clear. I consider Steve a very good friend. I totally disagree with him about the Fed in this way. I think we vastly overstate the Fed's impact on the economy. I think this notion that a quarter-point increase back in the fall was terrorizing the U.S. economy defies basic common sense. The Fed's just not that important. But I want Steve on the Fed board because the Fed's the biggest employer of economists in the world by their own admission. They monolithically or near monolithically agree that growth causes inflation. There's no evidence supporting that. Economic growth is all about falling prices by definition. And so I love the idea of a sweet man like Steve, a good man like Steve, combating this consensus within the economics profession, basically pricking the bubble that's been blown up over the decades by people so deluded. They actually think that war stimulates economic growth. I mean, it's just the profession has been so wrong about everything. I like the idea of someone else in there kind of challenging them on their views that are so easy to discredit.
Well, what bothers me, again, and I watch this, and Neal's right. Stephen's been on our show for many years. Personally, I happen to like him a tremendous amount. I think he's a great guy. And that's what's bothering me to this degree. When I saw him starting to defend, they brought up his divorce. They released information about his divorce. And that was a horrible thing to do. And I could see the trouble in his eyes and the concern and the tremor of his voice. And I said, they're taking a great guy, a really smart guy, who many are out there now on the left saying, oh, well, he doesn't have the background for this, which I find to be ridiculous. But it hurts me to watch Stephen go through the process and be attacked personally on things that could be academic discussion, which I think Steve is incredibly capable of defending. But to go into the dark shadows of someone's personal life, it is so implicitly and implacably unfair.
Oh, it was, and you knew it was going to happen. Economists have this reverential view of themselves that has nothing to do with reality. Again, we are talking about a profession so hopelessly confused. They literally believe World War II, all the killing and maiming and wealth destruction, was economically stimulative. They believe to a man and woman that the more capital allocated by Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi through government spending, that actually stimulates economic growth. They think too many people working and prospering causes inflation. I can't think, if I were an economist, I would hide it. I'd be so embarrassed to say that I was part of such a profession that's been so stupendously wrong about everything for so long. And so for them to say that Steve's not up to them, thank goodness he's not an economist, because why would you want to admit to being one given their track record? So I love the idea of, again, a different point of view inside there. I don't think it's going to change anything. That there's this notion on the left that, oh my God, Steve Moore's going to be at the Fed. Well, what are you afraid of? He's going to be one voice among how many people there who are going to disagree with him? But let's have at least a debate for once, because they've never experienced a debate in modern times. They all share this view that prosperity is a problem if it becomes too much.
So what do you think is the outlook for interest rates? I mean, what do you think the Fed's going to do? I mean, you had Larry Kudlow this week coming in and say, well, I think they're going to reduce interest rates by 25 bips. I mean, that's pretty amazing that he's coming out and predicting that, before it would happen. I mean, has that been done before?
Well, even if it does, my response is, so what? Let's say the Fed reduces rates to 1%. Do you think I could go out and borrow at 1%? Let's reduce it to the absurd. What if the Fed raises rates to 20%? Does anyone seriously think that Apple would suddenly pay 20% to borrow? Of course not. There's this notion that the Fed controls interest rates. Look, if the Fed could control even the short rate of credit, our economy wouldn't be worth talking about, and we wouldn't even care who's at the Fed. The simple truth is the Fed is a rate follower. It's not a rate setter. Implicit in this notion that it's a rate setter is that if New York City suddenly decided let's have a ceiling on apartment rents of $1,000 a month, implicit there is that suddenly there would be apartment plenty in New York. The reality is, if the Fed were as powerful as people assume it could be, there wouldn't be anything to borrow in the first place, because as we know in any other industry, when you impose price controls, you bring about scarcity. Well, the Fed's had zero for how many years? Did that suddenly cut off the credit spigot? That we focus on the Fed, that we care what it does is so backwards, and there's no basis for it.
Very good. Hey, John, well said, man. I learned a lot. Great stuff, man. We're going to get you back real soon. John Tamny from FreedomWorks, and he's the director for the Center for Economic Freedom, and we're all about economic freedom at Made in America. Hey, John, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great stuff.
Have a great weekend.
Great stuff. Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for this very, very fun and passionate day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Hey, Rich, I mean, that was great. John Tamny from FreedomWorks talking about the Fed and our good friend Stephen Moore, and they're just a bunch of fuddy-duddies over there anyway, and don't worry. And he's right. I mean, if the interest rates at the Fed, you know, if they push them up a quarter of a point or down a quarter of a point or even a whole point up or down, I mean, what difference is it going to make anyway? I mean, people are going to still be out there borrowing money, and you're going to be borrowing money based on your ability to pay it back, right? You know, so very, very interesting concept. Very, very interesting way to explain it. And, you know, when you talk about economists and a whole lot of economists getting together and talking about economic policy, it kind of makes your eyes glaze over, right?
And I'll tell you what the Fed does do in terms of affecting the economy. And he's right. Maybe, you know, they don't really manipulate the rate that way. But what they do manipulate is emotion. Because people have remember, in media, it's the perception.
Right?
Perception is everything. It doesn't matter what the truth is. Look at these idiots that are out there thinking socialism is great. Oh, what the perception, it's great. Everyone's going to get all this free stuff, and, you know, we're going to have guaranteed income, and we're going to have nice places to live, and, you know, we're going to, oh, my God, my Navient loan's going to go away, and all this other crap that's out there. But it's the perception, isn't it, Neal? So if the people feel that, oh, my God, the Fed's going to be raising the rates 4 times before the fourth quarter, that's what upset the market. Not that they were absolutely manipulating the rate. They were manipulating the impression of what people thought the rate was going to be. So, in effect, they do manipulate what people think the rate's going to be. And, by the way, then you have all this panic. And that's why the market took a complete dump around Christmas. That was the Christmas gift. By saying, well, we think we may be doing something. Oh, my God, the world's coming to an end. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, you know, Chicken Little syndrome.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. Hey, Rich, there's a headline this week, and, you know, I got to get your thoughts on this. In fact, our producer sent it to us. We got to bring this up. It's an amazing headline. Amazon's warehouse worker tracking system can automatically fire people without the involvement of their human supervisors. I mean, isn't that amazing?
Doesn't that scare you?
No.
I mean, come on. Doesn't that scare you?
That's pretty, you know, talk about artificial intelligence and oh, okay, you know, you just get what is it? You get a text on your phone and say, "Oh, you're fired."
I mean,
your
absolutely.
key doesn't work anymore, and you got 5 minutes to get out of the building, and your key doesn't work anymore after that. I mean, it is pretty amazing, though. I mean, they can right now, I guess, track you through the warehouse. I guess they can monitor, you know, what your productivity is, and if you don't hit certain levels, you know, just, you know, virtually, you know, you're out. It's just kind of like Amazon's a virtual company, right? I mean, you don't call and say, hey, where's my order? Everything's virtual. And let me tell you, we do a lot of business with Amazon. Great company. Everything is virtual. And now their warehouse workers, although they're human, they're going to be supervised by a virtual supervisor, a tracking system.
Someone's going to ask you, who's your supervisor, and go, Robbie the robot. I mean, this is Forbidden Planet right here. Now, in all sincerity, I have the same article in front of me because I know we were both thinking about it. And I got to tell you, I just think that's amazing that people can actually be functioning in the real world. And this isn't the virtual side, a real world, and a non-real entity known as 22837C, you know, is your boss, and that tells you that, you know, you're not working here anymore. Why? Well, because I don't think you're using your time right. That's a pretty scary thing to have happen to you. So, and we're only at the beginning of the 21st century. I can't wait for another 20, 25 years. It's really going to be, you know, super scary. Yeah, I mean, doesn't this concern you? You have a lot of employees, Neal. Could you comprehend doing that?
Well, see, I don't know how that's going to pass with the labor laws, and labor laws are created, you know, community by community, and the hiring and firing of people in many places. You know, it's, you know, you don't even have control of that. I mean, you own a company, but, you know, you don't even have control who works for you. And if they're not doing their jobs, you know, how and the steps you have to take in order to replace somebody who's just not measuring up. And you need to get someone in there who is doing the job. And many communities prevent you from making those decisions. So, again, the world that we live in. Very fascinating. I got to kind of get your thoughts on this. I was coming back from Philadelphia today. I was in an Uber at 6 a.m., and had a very fascinating conversation with the Uber driver, an African-American woman, and we're talking about just many things and her thoughts and all of that. And she thought, she really liked Elizabeth Warren. She didn't think that she was going to make it. She felt because the economy was very, very strong that that President Trump would get reelected if there wasn't any sort of calamity. And she talked about immigration and about, the stuff at the border and all of that. And it's all kind of made up. And, Americans don't want to do those jobs anyway. And all the people coming here are just jobs that nobody else wants. I thought it was a fascinating conversation, for, an Uber driver to be saying that all of the illegals coming into the country, they're not threatened by that because they still feel their jobs are safe because they're just going to go out and do some other work that nobody else wants to do, like, I guess, work in the agricultural fields or whatever. Very fascinating. Fascinating world that we live in, Rich.
It is fascinating.
Lots of ideas and lots of opinions, and I loved it, and I loved talking to her. She was very articulate, thought a little bit different than I did. But, hey, look, I thanked her for her thoughts because I really appreciate it. It's always good to listen to the other side, Rich. We always got to listen. Listen.
I do. I listen to my kids.
Yeah, that's right.
Say goodnight, Gracie.
Well, Rich, we do have to say goodnight because we've run out of time. But don't worry, we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.